So it's time to leave the waking world behind and enter the nightmare realm of Fatal Frame 3 yet again. So we find ourselves back in control of Kei after he narrowly avoided being strangled to death by the Kusabi. The problem remains, though, just where in the manner of sleep is Mio? Well, the game is pretty quick to give us a hint as to where we need to go next in the form of a vanishing ghost. And though it was a bit hard to see, that was the woman brushing her hair. And the gentle sobbing can give a pretty clear hint as to what's waiting for us on the other side. Unexpectedly, though, it does seem like there has been a little bit of an interior decoration done in here. And that will make any kind of future fighting in this room a tad bit on the difficult side. Hopefully, though, the woman brushing won't mind us too much. Though that obviously won't be the case. Now, she doesn't get anything new in this encounter, but this particular encounter with the woman brushing is very special. And you do want to make sure you fight her in this particular instance because of something we'll be seeing after we defeat her. The main problem with that is we are fighting as Kei, and as such we do extremely poor damage. But we do finally get to see a much clearer version of her using her hair-throwing spear attack. Not too dangerous, but it does limit the availability of doing any kind of fatal frames against her. There are shudder chances, but SK, you don't want to wait for those for the most part. You just want to spam shots against her. But yeah, here we see the reason why we did fight her this time around. And that's for this very special key. Now, we have seen the door that this key goes to before, though I never investigated it beforehand, and it's actually right downstairs. You may recall there was that tiny little half door next to the corridor leading to the little garden area, and that's what this key goes to. So let's go ahead and pop that door open and see what's waiting for us on the other side. Inside, we find a roped-off section of flooring that has seemingly given in, along with a mysterious well. And by taking a picture of the well, we'll get a musty piece of film to develop for later on. But we do recall a similar-looking well from Fatal Frame 2, but I do think that this is part of the Manor of Sleep itself, or at least the Kuze Shrine. Seems we can hear some disturbing noises coming from inside the well. Almost sounds like crying. In addition to that, you can also find a stone mirror over here in the corner in case you might need one for in the future, but, well, we do have something very important to get to that's very optional in this particular chapter, so let's go ahead and head on to that. And let's not pay any mind to what might be at the bottom of that well. Yeah, so you might recall earlier on in this stair corridor here, there was this large chest that only Kay could move. And there is going to be something important waiting on it for us on the other side. If you recall, a couple of chapters earlier, we did see a ghost walking along this second floor area outcropping on the courtyard here. And this does bring up a somewhat interesting little piece of architecture that will make sense in a little bit of time, probably in a couple of updates. For right now, though, it probably just seems a bit odd that there's such a difficult room to get to. It almost seems like it's shut off from the rest of the manor. Inside we find a pretty barren room. On the floor, though, we find another entry into the woman brushing's diary. And we see that this was a room meant for solitude, away from everyone else. Specifically for her solitude.
You'll be back.
Seems that maybe the head of the Kuze family was not happy with her inability to let go of that young man that only bared her a male son. Also, if we look out the window here, we do find that we are in a somewhat familiar location. We're actually right over the hearth room. In addition to that, we can find a hidden ghost, and this is the woman brushing. Whether or not this was her final resting place, I seem to think it is. But we can find some hidden items waiting in the drawer here. It's our first piece of Type 0 film. Yet again, this is much like in Fatal Frame 2, where it's the strongest film in the game, but it has the drawback of having the longest load time and the least amount of film you'll ever get in the game, so it has very limited usages. But we don't have to walk back out along that outside area. We do find a little bit of a shortcut down into the hearth room here. It's not an especially useful shortcut, but it's still better than walking slowly along the outside.
Are you there?
Still, though, we do get something of a bit of a punishment for disturbing that area where the woman brushing spent her last days. But as we have already fought her before, we do kind of need to fight her again, as this is another very special encounter. But since this fight is going to take a little bit of time, I guess I should point out Kay's special outfit. He is wearing a gray yukata, and if you pay special attention, he's also wearing a special headband. Both of those items can be unlocked by merely beating the game on normal. But we've almost gotten her down. But for our troubles this time around, we are going to get 2 items, the first of which is a holly key, which we don't know just yet where that might be going. Secondly of all, we get another upgraded lens, or another power lens for the camera, and this one is brand new for Fatal Frame 3, the Pierce lens. Now, the Pierce lens is very situational. It's best used against enemies with a lot of health. It basically will just allow your shot to do more damage by lowering the armor, I suppose, for a given enemy. But it's only for 1 shot, so I honestly can't recommend using it for the most part over something like the Zero lens, which is just straight direct damage. But I don't know, someone out there might have a better use for it. But well, we have another long trek back straight to the kimono room where we first fought the woman brushing. Now, this might not be immediately obvious if you didn't check her little broken mirror stand here, but this drawer on it is locked, and we now have the key to open it. And inside we find a pretty informative book regarding one of the songs or the series of lullabies we've been hearing about. This one, though, gives a little bit more information specifically for the Kuze Shrine lullaby. Especially goes into some differences, such as in the words for Holly, or the emphasis on Holly, but more importantly, it talks about a hidden verse that wasn't in the original lullaby. Specifically, it goes into the fact that it doesn't really make it sound like a lullaby, since it doesn't mention sleep at all, and instead just goes into repetitions about this quote-unquote other side. The other side, well, the person that wrote this doesn't really have a clear idea of what that means, but it doesn't have a real positive connotation, needless to say, especially since it mentions the rift as being some blockage to the other side. And from what we've seen, the rift is pretty much darkness incarnate. Otherwise, though, it is important to point out that this is all stuff you can only get on New Game Plus and is somewhat pivotal to getting a very special ending. Mostly due to the fact of this photograph, which coincidentally looks a lot like Kay. But it's not Kay at all, it's the folklorist who the woman brushing originally fell in love with, Akito. How coincidental. Along with that photo, we also find an odd little earring. Looks like a pretty dangerous earring, needless to say, but that thing on the end almost looks like it could be a stake. But this was that earring that the woman brushing had gave to her young boy child, who later came back and made his way down into the Chamber of Thrones and seemingly caused this unleashing of the rift. All very important, but all pretty optional. With all that out of the way, though, we can now finally head on to the main part of this chapter. Even though it is a bit vague as to where you do need to go, through Ray's own machinations and her own chapters of the game, we do have a brand new area that we can now safely explore as Kay. And that is through this little garden area, and through those double doors that we've seen you go through so very many times before. Also, the woman on all fours is still slinking around in dangerously small crawl spaces. We actually will be learning a bit more about her later on, as we did give that photo away to Miku before. But something has suddenly changed for Kay, and not for the better. The air is thick and heavy, and he's surrounded by what he can only describe as a miasma. Just very choking, very heavy, and it's not the same daydream-esque situation that Ray found herself in before. This is a brand new feature, and one I can't really say is a good feature for Fatal Frame 3, and that's this odd miasma will, well, let's say it will attract some of the worst things in the game, and it will be a permanent fixture until we find some means to get rid of it. So you do want to be quick in this courtyard area. If you wait for too long, you could miss the trigger for that vanishing ghost up there. But since we are in something of the tutorial area for this miasma, we don't have to worry about rushing too much for right now, which means we can explore a little bit of this large courtyard area. Especially considering that there are 2 hidden ghosts waiting for us. The first one being over by this little gated off cemetery. Or monument, I suppose it would be. And in addition to that hidden ghost, if we head behind this little fenced off area, even though it is a bit hard to see, there's an item waiting. And some more Type 0 film. Now, while technically Kay would probably not get the most usage out of this, it still doesn't hurt to go ahead and pick it up, as we aren't really for certain whenever Ray or Miku might be making their way out here. In addition to that, there is this destroyed building or structure on the other side here with another hidden ghost. You know, for all the carpenters they got, it seems this place was not very structurally sound with the sheer amount of people that got crushed under things. But in addition to that, we can find another reoccurring nightly stash of herbal medicine. But that's all we really need out here in the courtyard, I guess. Well, just to satiate our curiosity, I guess we should probably check this large shrine here in the center of the courtyard. Though it's not going to be as simple as that. But we haven't reached a dead end just yet. You might recall from the end of the previous chapter, there was another doorway off to the side here. Also, along with this doorway, there is a hidden away item behind the stairs and some more sacred water. But even though the door here is barred, Kay, being the manly man that he is, can easily unbar the door. But instead of finding ourselves in a new area, we find ourselves back inside the Osaka house, or at least a portion of the manor connected to the Osaka house. So we have no other choice than to just maybe explore All Gods Village more. Well, yeah, we got a familiar vanishing ghost watching us, but this time around she did drop something. And it's another Pinwheel Key. We already know where this might need to go. There was that other pinwheel puzzle up in the twins' room. I Do want to highly recommend, though, that if you are playing this yourself and you are stuck in the miasma in this particular section, that you don't go exploring too much, as there is a very strong opportunity for the tattooed woman to show up and harass you to no end.
I want to heal you.
And in fact, the game is pretty adamant about showing you just where you might need to be heading. Yet again, just more memories of Mio and her time in All Gods Village, along with some memories that might not have appeared last time around. The odd thing is that the description given for this hidden ghost is not for something from All Gods Village, even though it is in a very similar position. Seems that this guy was somewhat in love with Reika, the woman that became the tattooed lady. But yet again, just a slightly more difficult pinwheel puzzle, but nothing too difficult. And what's our reward for our efforts? Why, it's a brand new area, full of reading material. Now, the good news is we don't have to read a lot in here, but there is a bit of useful information stored away in some of these bookshelves, such as reading up about the unleashing. Now, this isn't the rift being unleashed. Instead, it's the feelings that were unleashed upon the maiden, stored away in her eyes via the Mirror of Loss. Yeah, a lot of this isn't super necessary to know about for the future. It just paints a very, very depressing picture of what this ritual really entailed. A lot of the wording we see here about loss and pain and torture and torment and endless suffering, it's all things that have been brought up in the past regarding all these rituals, but this one somehow manages to take it just a step further than needed, honestly. That's all the reading material on this side of the room. Guess we need to keep an eye out for this Mirror of Loss, since all these books seem to be talking about it so much. Now, the tearing is a bit interesting because it does not paint a very happy picture for the tattooed priestess who does not manage to stay asleep. If she's not able to leave all of her regrets behind, her skin is flayed off of her body, and her body is sent to this quote-unquote other side, while her skin is enshrined and left to be sung to by all the shrine maidens. It does not really paint a very positive picture of becoming this quote-unquote tattooed priestess, but in the end, it's probably for the greater good. At least I'm sure that's what they're told, as they're used as some kind of focal point for all of these other pains of the world that are tattooed on their body via the blood of the dead. But we are almost done with our reading material. There's just one more book hidden away. And the good news is this one is at least going to be somewhat helpful and a little bit less depressing than the other books. Because this one talks about this miasma that's pretty much surrounding us. It does outline a bit about the dangers of being a living soul in the darkness, as it seems to attract all manner of unspeakable things, but most importantly of all, it talks about a way to dissipate this horrible miasma using a magical blue flame. And that blue flame is what we're going to need to keep an eye out for. But outside of all of that, I'm sure you've been hearing that cry for help. It's coming from upstairs here. And amazingly, it's not the woman on all fours. Instead, I think it's coming from behind this folding screen here. Though, you do want to be a bit careful about rushing to take this photograph, as you might miss something pretty easily. Yeah, now you can clearly see that there was a vanishing ghost there, but we didn't receive any confirmation for taking a picture of one. But do believe me, as we look at this photo here, you see Screen Girl. Yep, there is a vanishing ghost there, but it's incredibly easy to miss out on it, and instead take a picture of the musty film opportunity that is right next to it. It can take quite a bit of practice to get that particular vanishing ghost down, but you can now finally take a picture of what that little shrine maiden was guarding. We get a musty picture. More importantly, though, we get the item we were looking for, which is this purifying light. And we now get this new icon in the lower left corner, and this is going to be our way of dissipating this horrible miasma, which is choking our poor Kay and leading all sorts of unspeakable things to find him. The main problem being that, as with most candles, it has a very limited lifespan, I think in the range of about 5 to 6 minutes, and that is where one of the difficulties and annoyances come in. We are now under a forced strict time limit, which means, well, backtracking to find people like Miss Takegawa here as a vanishing ghost can become a pretty large hassle, especially if you aren't very good at combat or are prone to getting lost in the game. Honestly, it's a pretty odd decision on the side of the game makers, but we can't really fault them, as the rest of the game is pretty entertaining all around. Yeah, as we make our way through that door, find ourselves dangerously on the roof. But we are definitely still on the right track. The good news is that Kay is pretty fearless in the situation and has no qualms about trying to make this incredibly dangerous jump between the buildings. As we get a lovely view of the courtyard, we can take a quick hidden ghost picture, revealing something that we have heard mentioned a few times before, and that's this funeral procession-esque situation that the Kuze Shrine would sometimes hold as people came to unload all their feelings onto that poor tattooed priestess. Also, I am not sure what that particular ghost is. It's not on the spirit list, and as far as I know, there's really no other way to take a picture of it other than through the floor. But as I was heading across the roof, I think for the first time as I was playing this, it really struck me that even though we are in a pretty large shrine structure already, yeah, there is a second, much larger structure housing this one. It really makes you wonder just about the sheer size and scope of the Kuze Shrine, let alone the Manor of Sleep itself. But you want to make sure not to miss out on the film reels stuck inside the bookcase here. Might make for some interesting viewing. And along with that, hidden away in the box here, we can find some Type 90 film. But if you keep in mind which way we have been heading, this is now that locked shrine that we were unable to get into from the bottom floor. The bad news is that it does force us into another very slow tightrope walking situation here along all these beams. And it is something of a minor maze, but more importantly, something seems to be going on behind the screen here. It's a bit hard to make out, maybe if we got a little bit closer. It's a bit hard to make out, but that seems to be that woman that we saw trapped in that hanging prison from before where Ray woke up in the last update. Guess we are going to have to head down there, but more importantly, we can find another refill for our Purifying light, and this will be a reoccurring little stash that we can head to in the future. And I do highly recommend keeping track of these as they are incredibly important, especially in the upcoming updates, where we're definitely going to have to be spending a lot of time running around and fighting. Also, there is some sacred water and another stone mirror up here, but as such, we don't really need to waste time on that. Instead, we should probably go ahead and head down and investigate this shrine a little bit more. Seems though that, as per usual, we might have just been hallucinating or seeing whatever the Manor of Sleep was wanting us to see. Still though, I think it is going to be important in the future that we get through the screen somehow, but first, I guess we might as well investigate this horrible room a little bit more. I think this is one of the many shrines that has been mentioned before. I don't think this is the Chamber of Thorns. I think this is maybe the Chamber of Loss, the Shrine of Sleep itself. It's kind of hard to say. But we do find some Type 61 film. We're just really stocking up on the more powerful films for K. And in the center of the room here, we do find a pretty extravagant looking altar with what they describe as esoteric Buddhist symbols and ritual items. In the center, though, we do find a pretty odd mirror, though from what we have been reading up, we can probably put two and two together and figure out this is that mirror of loss we heard described about before. Also, I do apologize, I'm trying to pick up that item in the center there. But we get our final piece of reading material for the dream sequence. Talks about the piercing of the soul. Now, this piercing of the soul is this tattooing process that we've heard so much about, where the pains of the world are etched onto the tattooed priestess. Also about the necessity for the priestess to stay asleep, otherwise those fears and horrible feelings are just going to spill out from the dream into the real world. Also, in case you did not investigate the altar, the game automatically draws your attention to it after reading that book. Also, it seems like that mirror might be missing, but we don't really have time to worry about that, as we are assaulted immediately by two needle women at once. And while not necessarily a difficult fight, it can be pretty dangerous if you don't understand their fighting process, or if for some reason you really just want to get Fatal Frame moments with Kay. Yet again, it's really not a good idea to do so. You really want to just try to get his maximum power, which you can do pretty quickly, and try to spam shots as best you can. The good news is, for the most part, the needle women really just want to give you hugs, and as such, they are pretty easy to deal with. Especially their teleport ability. They 90% of the time will just teleport right behind you, and you can just walk straight through them without any kind of an issue. I guess more than anything, this is just to catch you off guard and maybe to try to overwhelm you, but still not a terribly difficult fight all around. Especially when it's just a one-on-one fight. Fatal Frame opportunities are pretty easy to come by, even though I do manage to screw up getting a good combo going. But we get no reward for our efforts, just the sense of accomplishment for a job well done. Problem being, though, that well, now the shrine is just another dead end. I guess we're just gonna have to find something to fill that pedestal, but I guess that means we're just gonna have to keep on exploring the Manor of Sleep. So, we've made a couple more steps further into the manor, found a couple more horribly morbid shrines awaiting inside. But there is a very good chance now that we have gotten possibly enough information to really make some judgments and make some strides in maybe just solving whatever is going on in this horrible, horrible, dream-like world. Still, I think the best place to start out on gathering this information is probably with Miku.
Oh, good morning.
She seems in less than a chipper mood, though.
Ray? Here.
And that's probably from all the morbid information that we've been having her gather. In this case, it's regarding that woman on all fours. Not the happiest story around. It seems that a young woman was living with her family, and the family was burglarized, or yeah, they were robbed. And the woman managed to find herself hiding away in the closet while her parents and her younger brother were brutally murdered by the robbers, while she herself was able to escape relatively unharmed by hiding in the closet. It wasn't until a number of days later that the woman managed to find her way out. She spent almost 4 days in the closet, and as you can probably imagine, she was very traumatized. And as such, she has gone missing, like so many other people.
I'm sorry. I blanked out for a second.
Yep, that is the story for the woman on all fours.
Raining again.
Also to hopefully give some
Oh, I'm sorry.
backstory as to
I blanked out for a second.
why she seems to favor the small, cramped spaces instead of fighting out in the open or trying to attack us in anything other than very close spaces. But we do have some film to develop, along with something else that might be easily missed in the house. Yeah, we've seen this stain a couple of times before, but this time around it looks a tad bit different. Yeah, things are definitely getting worse and worse in the real world. But there are some points of interest that we can see as we develop the film. The first of which is that young girl. I think this is probably Amane in the attic area. As the film has been developed, we can see that she is holding on to something special in her hand, what appears to be a book. And second of all, we have that picture of the well. And as we develop it, it kind of goes along with those horrible sounds we were hearing before. Probably a lot of dead babies waiting at the bottom of that well. But as we are thrust into night, and we do have some film, I don't know, maybe we can have Miku take a quick look at them. We are greeted by a very unwelcome tune.
Ray? What's the matter?
Yeah, things have gone a little bit worse for Miku than we first imagined. Seems she might be hallucinating even worse than Ray is, and she might be feeling even more guilty about leaving Mafuya back in Himuro Mansion than was first hinted at. I don't know, hopefully we can do something for Miku before it's too late. Before it's too late for all of us.
Miku.
Yeah, sadly, there's Just nothing we can do for Miku for right now. Well, the best we can do is head back into our dream world and see if we can't make strides further, at least, to calm whatever horrible rift is opening up in the dream. Hopefully you'll join me next time as we head back into the dream world and make our way one step closer to figuring out this mystery. See you then.